Last week, I added the ability for share links in Big Sexy Poems to contain a snapshot of the poem at the time the snapshot was created. And the reason I did this is that sometimes I want to share a poem with someone, but then I want to continue to edit the poem, and I don't necessarily want those edits to show up right away in the snapshot. So to demonstrate, I can go into this poem, Decimated, and add a share link, and we're just going to call this Snapshot Demo. And we're going to mark it as a snapshot, because if it's not a snapshot, any edits will show up right away within the share link. I'll create this share, and if we open this up in a new tab, we'll see that we get the poem here. But if I go back into the poem, and let's go here, and let's just edit it, and we'll say edited, and save that, we can see that edited here is in the internal page. But if we go to the poem and refresh, you'll see there is no edited here, and that's because, again, this is a snapshot. Now, over time, I want to release those changes. So let's just, as an example here, come in and let's replace this entirely with a slightly modified version. Now, as I'm doing all of my edits, it might not be clear to me what has actually changed. And what I've added over the weekend is now an application of the Myers Diff algorithm that I worked on a couple of weeks ago in Cold Fusion, and I've applied that to the share link. So if I go into the share link detail, we can see that it is a snapshot and that it is indeed outdated compared to the live poem. And if we click anywhere in this row, it'll take us to the internal share view page, and we can see that the snapshot is enabled. And now below here, we can see recent changes. And this is on the left here, the version in the snapshot. This is what the user currently sees. So you can see your juicy fruits. And if we come back here and I refresh, you can see still your juicy fruits, whereas in the live poem, it's your tasty fruits. So we can see here line by line changes as well as individual word substitutions, right? A lot of poetry has to do with just increasing, let's call it the good mouth feel, the way that the rhymes roll off the tongue, the way that the mouth feels as it's saying things, making things that are easier to pronounce, making things that just rhyme slightly better. I'm, by no means an expert here. This is the stuff that goes through my head when I think about this, about the writing. So we can see that there are a bunch of just minor edits here, words on individual lines. Some words don't change at all. Getting this to work, this side-by-side comparison, I actually had to work with Claude quite a bit over the weekend. And I'll just jump into the code. I'm not really going to review the code so much to say that I have this Cold Fusion component now inside of my Big Sexy Poems repository. And really all it's doing is wrapping the Myers Diff algorithm that I worked on the other week. And you can see here in the get split rows, it's taking the original lines of the poem and the modified lines of the poem. And in this case, the original is the thing that's in the snapshot, and the modified is the live poem. So we're showing the delta between the snapshot and the original. I didn't really know how to handle this well, so I'm actually just appending, or let's say prepending, the title to the poem itself. And in fact, if we go and look at the diff again, you can see that the title of the poem, Decimated, is actually just the first line in the diff. This just made the diff easier to deal with. That way, if the poem title changed, it would show up in the diff as well. So I'm getting that Myers Diff under the hood, and then I'm building the split rows, this side-by-side comparison, and then I'm tokenizing the split rows. The tokenizing here in this case is just these word level substitutions. Without the tokenizing, we'd still get the red and the green rows, but we wouldn't get any of that low level insight into what has actually changed in the rows. Now, the way that this side-by-side comparison works, and this was something that Claude helped me think through, which was this is one of the things I'm enjoying most about AI, is just being able to talk through algorithms with it. Essentially, what we're going to do is we take the array of the Myers Diff operations. These are the delete, 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 insert, 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 equals, delete, insert, that kind of stuff. And we're going to zipper them together. So essentially, we're going to iterate over the operations. As we hit blocks of mutations, we're going to keep track of them. So when we hit a delete, we're going to add it to the deletes array. When we hit an insert, we're going to add it to the inserts array. And these are sequential, meaning that this is a block of deletes followed by a block of inserts. And once we have those, we're then going to figure out the largest number of sequential deletes and inserts, loop over that, and then the left becomes positionally the delete at that index, and the right becomes positionally the insert at that same index. And if we don't have a corresponding index for that delete or that insert, we're using the Elvis operator here to fall back to a duplication of the placeholder. And the placeholder is just it's an empty type with a value of an empty string. So essentially, we're then zippering those left and rights together into our split rows. And again, anything that's orphaned will show up as an orphaned row. So we can do that as an example here. Let's go back into the decimated and let's go into the composer here, and let's just say one last insert at the end. We'll save that, and if we go back into the share link, what you'll see is that we just have two empty placeholders here on the left because we actually have no inserts that correspond positionally to these, or we have no deletes that correspond positionally to these new inserts. So anyway, I just wanted to share improvements here to the Big Sexy Poems project I'm working on for funsies. And it makes me think, now that I have this snapshot for the shares, why do I not have some sort of snapshot for the demo, for the poem itself? That feels like a good next step. And again, something that I probably want to discuss with Claude, because how often do you want to store snapshots of a poem? How often do those want to get compacted? Meaning maybe the recent ones get stored on every save, and then if they're more than, say, an hour old, maybe they get compacted into windows of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that kind of information. Again, that's something that I think Claude would really help me locate a good trade-off. So anyway, that's all I want to show.